Yeah, so welcome to everyone. My name is Thorsten. I'm from Austria. I'm working for Cisco as a system engineer for our advanced malware prevention. What I want to show you is something a little bit different about the endpoint. So how we see the endpoint, what is important today, how malware acts, behavior. And I think that's an interesting thing here, an unexpected error occurred. So what it means. So we often coming to a customer, the customer has a problem, and then someone tries to figure out what happened. And then that happens. An unexpected error occurs, so that means the customer is not able to do any research and is not able to figure out what happened inside the company. So let's see if that works. So no, just a second. Okay, so just information from my side. I'm working in the endpoint business since approximately 20 years. Started with NT 3.51. So that was my first thing doing security. Then I switched to disk encryption, file encryption, proxy environments, vulnerability management, data loss prevention products. So I have not only sold the products, I also installed it and supported it. And based on my experience, I have one interesting sentence here. The strategy, products and malware must fit to be successful in the future. And in the next 1.5 hours, I want to show you what is behind that sentence. So what I did, this is an outcome of my experience from the last 15 years working as a security consultant. So what I did is, I took a look how malware works, how the company is dealing with malware and which products they have in place, and not just products, it's more the product approach and solution approach. So what that means, company, like if you have already a SIM product. So when we are talking today about SIM, it's not SIM in a generic level, it's a more SIM in a threat response architecture. So the thing is always, which information are you feeding into a SIM? Is it an event or is it information? And the second step is then which intelligence inside your SIM or inside a SIM is processing the information and what is the outcome and what is my process behind that outcome. Or another example, a sandbox. If you have a sandbox, so many customers are using a sandbox as a scanner. They're plugging in the sandbox to the network, they're connecting it to a device, to a proxy, to an IPS system, to an email system, and what they're doing then, they're using their sandbox as a scanner. So let's talk about today what happens when you're using your sandbox as a threat response tool. And there are so many things here. And what I want to show you as well, also here malware. So what happens if malware is not malware in on a typical view, like what happens when you only have legitimate operating system feature usage? There is no file, there is just activity. How we can figure out if there's some just bad activity in my environment and which architecture I need to figure that out. What I want to do now is give you some introduction slides to understand our architecture a little bit better. So I don't have any product names in my presentation. This is not a sales presentation, there's also no product name presentation. So what we are doing, what we are generating with our solution is generating context. So what that means, you see here an event. This event, it's really a bad air here. Just a story. What means event? Event does not show the real problem. Event is just a single spot on a big context. So what we are doing now is here, what our solution approach is, bringing information into relationship. So that means maybe that green one is an IP. The yellow one maybe is an URL, and the blue ones maybe are just behavior. What means behavior? Command line argument. Command line argument for a specific application. Yeah. So what we do is now is we bringing that together, generating that context. So, and using that context, you are able to detect non-malicious artifacts as a malicious activity in your environment. Okay, next thing, what we have. Single spot versus multi-spot. So what that means. So you see here in our signatures you have known good, known bad. So AV signature, really working properly, IPS rules working properly, filters on my email system working properly. So we have that known good, we have that known bad, that is covered in our engine, that is covered in our signatures, but we have that big spot of unknown things. For that unknown things, we already know that engines like machine learning, in the endpoint, and other stuff, email and web and IPS, to detect something maybe is unknown and they want to block. Yeah? The problem today is we have complex attack scenarios. I will show you complex attack scenarios a little bit later in my presentation. I always have a short demo for you. A complex situation is a multi-staged attack where no file is inside your company. So that means if you have a multi-staged attack over time, maybe over 1 or 2 weeks, this activity or this threat cannot be detected on a single spot. No engine is able to detect maybe an attack which going over 1 week on a single spot. Your IPS is not possible to do that, your web, your email, and also your endpoint. Okay, so you see, I think it was a picture from, I think, Gotham City. So what you see here, the red spots should showing I have malicious activity. So we have one single spot, but we see we have many, many bad things happening. Yeah? So when I now take a look on that red spot here, it does not show the real problem. We may block that, but maybe not. Context gives us now a new insight into a malicious activity. So we are generating relationship between the things. And what we can do now that that's the cool stuff with context. So maybe there is one orange spot, that means it's an unknown. Could also be an unknown executable, an unknown IP, an unknown PowerShell script, unknown behavior. And we also have well-known applications. So what we can figure out with a context is, I have a well-known application where no product will ever block, like a Windows component. Just an example, Windows Update. Windows Update will never be detected as malicious from any engine you have. But what happens if something in your environment uses your Windows Update in a malicious way? So what we now have to do to figure out that, we are generating context around that Windows Update process, what happened before, what happens after, bringing artifacts, bringing behavior, observables, all that stuff into relationship, and figured out, yes, something has used my Windows Update in a malicious way, and therefore I have a problem. Okay, some endpoint challenges. So today, what was my experience with customers? Customers are installing endpoint AV, having more and more engines, generating their RFIs, what an AV should do on the endpoint, expecting an endpoint can protect. Here we see also our AV comparison websites. Which detection rate is better? What I want to show you today, which content is not covered in that process, in that comparison. Just some counters we can think about. Talos, our threat research group, so we have hundreds of full-time researchers. We are defining approximately 5 billion hashes per week. We have 5 billion hashes new in our hash database in our backend. That's an impressive amount of hashes. You can see 120 terabyte and so on and so on. So what I have done is the following. I started my process monitor. You know, process monitor is a Windows tool where you can process your full activity on your Windows endpoint. And within 20 minutes, it was my Surface Pro 4, standard notebook, Windows 10, some applications and so on. 46 million operating system events in 20 minutes. So these are 8 million file events, 12,000 process events, approximately 114 network events, like establishing a network connection, closing a network connection, 35 million registry events. And let's think about that. What we are expecting, or what many people are expecting, is that an endpoint is able to compare 8 million file events with 5 billion hashes we have per week. And that in real time without any performance impact on our endpoint. To show you that in real life, we did a testing. We had a customer in Austria, they had 25,000 endpoints. 250 offices, 150 internet outbreaks, but all Windows 7 machines. So we did the following test. We hashed all the files on a disk from the systems, from any system, but only executable code. No text files, no script files, really only executable code, exe files, DLL files. Took that hashes, and then we compared that hashes with virus total. You know virus total, 60 vendors and more. So what do you think? How many, just think for yourself, how many unknown executables, I have to take a look on the time. In the first week, we figured out 1.2 million unknown executables. 1.2 million. So the result here is the following. If you have the information from all vendors you know, Trend, Symantec, McAfee, also our database, Asset, Kaspersky, and many, many more, you're getting the information, all they have, stored in your local data center, that does not solve your problem you have. That's the thing. If you don't believe, take a tool, hash your files on your disk, and compare it with virus total, and take a look how many executables are in your environment. Sorry. So, the thing is, protection engines are really good today. Yeah? But what we are talking today is also protection on the one side and threat response on the other side. I will cover that in the next slides. The thing is, the problem is we don't do a one-to-one comparison. What we're doing is we are comparing this amount of information with a complex attack scenario. And think about your endpoint, 5 billion. And maybe that is on a timeline from a couple of hours or just minutes. How an endpoint should process that. This is a thing that cannot be done on the endpoint in any way with no vendor. Trust me, if any salespeople come to you, we do anything on the endpoint, don't trust them. You will find a specific type of threat that is possible. The protection engines are really working great. They are really detecting much stuff. But be aware that there are many things that cannot be detected on your endpoint, especially when you have a threat hunting process and you want to do threat hunting. So, you see, this is my timeline that shows the 46 million operating system events. So, I think it's one too much. Yes, there are many things on your endpoint, and then you have that single threat event. Now think about my starting statement with your SIM product. So you're feeding a threat event in your SIM. And my most favorite threat event is from an endpoint something is suspicious. I figured out something suspicious, maybe I have blocked, maybe the endpoint has not blocked. So if you have the best intelligence on your SIM, what should your intelligence generate about that information? Yeah? For threat hunting, we need all that information, what happens before that threat event, maybe there is no threat event as well, and what happens after, to figure out. And the next question is here, what I'm always talking to customers is, when you are getting an information, like I have an USB stick here with an indication of compromised files with approximately 10,000 observables, IPs, domains, registry keys. Is my architecture today, is it possible with my architecture to check my environment automatically if something was active? Most customers can do that. And this is the first thing what happens when you're coming to a threat response thing. Okay, some other things. Once again, we have that 46 million operating system events. When should an endpoint ask the cloud? For every file, that's not possible. That would completely break the cloud, makes also no sense. Like, makes no sense when asking the cloud every time a log file is written. Or what is my configuration? What happens when I have a wrong configuration? What happens when my endpoint does not work properly? When should I upload a file for advanced analytics to my sandbox? So think about, there is one failure in your configuration and you are uploading text files to your sandbox. The next 2 weeks, your sandbox will analyze text files without any outcome. Yeah? So that's a really, you see, so such an endpoint is really a complex stuff. It's not just a piece of software. Okay, let's go a little bit more into threat hunting. What you see here is my CMD, that's my Windows command line, and there is a user added to my system. Is this malware or not? It is. It's part of an attack. But no customer has this in his approach. The thing is, how can I figure out this stuff? That maybe is easier because maybe I don't know that user, I don't add users in that way to my system. But you need 2 things here. You need, first of all, the right sensor mechanism on your endpoint, and you need the right intelligence which processes that information and then generates context around that stuff to figure out, in that case, adding a user to my system was part of a malware attack. So we can now go deeper. This one. Bitsadmin, that's my Windows Update client, is used to download a file and stores it on my C drive at trust.exe. Bad or not? First of all, Bitsadmin is trusted, always exclude. Remove that, you don't have Windows Update anymore. What people are doing now in their SIM is they have maybe information and generating their personal rules. If you are managing your policies, your updates, your upgrades, you're getting the events. Don't separate it so much. In the first step. In the second step, our view for an endpoint is different. We know we have analysis, should be analysis, not analytics. We have analysis processes we need for threat response. We also know that's not possible on the endpoint alone. So we are splitting that. So we have our protection engines, and we know we have complex analysis processes. So now we do two things. First of all, we are adding intelligence to the backend. And adding intelligence means we have CM and SOAR capabilities. We are not replacing a SIM. SOAR for automated reactions, and SIM to generate the information our endpoint now generates with the endpoint monitoring capabilities. So what we are doing is here, we are monitoring file, process, network, and command line activity on the endpoint. I give an example. So what do you think? If a customer or if an AV vendor has seen a malicious file on 10 computers worldwide, is it a high value or a low value? Interesting question, or? It is a high value. 10 computers worldwide where I have seen the same malware is a high value. So think about now ransomware. So there is a new ransomware active on your endpoint. That ransomware does something, and 2 minutes later that ransomware deletes itself from your endpoint again. Something happens on your endpoint. Then a file is dropped on the disk. So we are monitoring that and sending that information to the backend. We know also the parent process which has generated that new file. Then this new file is executed, so a new process is generated on my system. So we are monitoring that and sending it to the backend. Then maybe that new process generates a network connection. We are monitoring that. And maybe that new process executes bitadmin with a specific command line argument, or executes a PowerShell script. We are monitoring that and sending it back to the backend. So what we are trying, or what is the solution design is here, we are moving time and resource-intensive analysis processes to the backend. So there is that file. This file, which is only here for 2 minutes, is processed over the next 7 days here. So we are generating all information about that file. Disposition change. We are getting information from ThreatGrid if this file is analyzed. We are getting maybe information from MyTree. And if there is any change for the disposition of that file, with our SOAR capabilities, we are generating a completely different outcome in our console and doing also the cleaning up on the endpoint. That's included by default. So the thing is, the cool stuff is here, if that new command, so we have that command line execution here, and maybe we see the same command line execution on a worldwide base from a sample we are analyzing. So when we see that execution, we can now generate that relationship between just behavior, maybe a command line. That's the endpoint. And that's why we need endpoints. So on top, so we have our threat intelligence group and advanced analytics, that is our sandbox environment where virus total is just a behavior indicator. So we're talking about context the whole day, today, context. That means we are analyzing a file, we see what that file is doing. We have, I think 1,500 indicators already, and only one of them is virus total. So there is an information from virus total, we are getting the information from 60 vendors and adding that information to the report. But we're also adding MyTree. So that means maybe we have botnet so we are examining botnets. We see information on MyTree how cyber criminals are working, acting, and we are comparing a sample the behavior of that sample with behavior from hacking groups, and giving this information to our advanced analytics to the result. And now, once again, we needed CM capabilities. This information from the analytics is sent to the backend and automatically correlated with anything we are monitoring on the endpoint. There's really much power behind. That's fully automated without anything. Okay, so what's the time? 40 minutes. Okay, you know, I have to take a look because my time management is awesome bad. Okay, agentless detection. So we have products there. So what is why we have that agentless detection? We know we have many devices which cannot be detected, or not detected, sorry, that was wrong, where we cannot install endpoint AV, IoT devices, phones, printers, or sound bars. Yeah, the sound bar, there is one system which uses a not route-able protocol. That's really bad for companies, but you know, someone buys that shit, connects it to the network, and the IT has to handle it. And then you have a network with a device, with a protocol which is not routable, and you can lower your complete network infrastructure. The question here always is from my side to customers, what is your approach, or what is your design for that devices? Are you ignoring it? So do you have inside your solution design a strategy how you can figure out if such a device does something bad? Like an IP camera uses a printer to upload files to the internet. We had that situation. From a real world example, I had a customer in Austria. The data was stolen and they never figured out what happened. So 3 weeks, I think a couple of months later, their management system for air condition was broken, and they have seen the disk was full. Hey, that is a 250 gigabyte disk, and the management software has only 100 megabyte. So what happened there? And they figured out, oh, there are many office documents on that disk. So the hacker have forgotten to clean up the disk, and so they were lucky. They figured out what happened, but they have never figured out why it happened. Network and third party. Third party is important. So we are talking about architecture. So what we will do is we will know Cisco proprietary things using inside the architecture. So we were using sticks and taxi for information exchange. Okay, this is threat response, not so interesting. That slide, sorry. So what we are doing now is with threat response. What is threat response? We are bringing the information all of our products or systems are generating together in one tool. The thing is, have I activated that slide? I hope so. Let's see. Yes. What it means. You see here we have just behavior. So we have maybe an event where is a command line. It's already critical. So we have that SOAR and SIEM capabilities generating an outcome. We see maybe the same command line in an analysis report on my sandbox. We may see a command line when inspecting an endpoint. And we may see the same thing in a web request. I will show you that example a little bit later. And with our intelligences, we are bringing all that information together in one tool and showing you what happened. To understand what happened. Okay, so real world example. First of all, here it is. This is the outcome. Just an example what I mean. This is threat response. So let's think about, you have an IP, you have a domain, and you have to figure out, I give you a domain, and I have a domain for you, giving you that domain, and then the question is, give me any information you have about that domain inside your environment. Because we know the domain is bad. Last Sunday, between 1 in the morning until 5 in the morning, we need to know anything about that domain. is your architecture today, is it possible with your architecture to figure out that? It's just the extremely easiest threat hunting step. And how long does it take? And that is our approach. So what we did is, so you're putting in that domain, you see 9 targets. You see the emails, you see the subject, you see any connection to that domain, you see which files, which processes from the endpoint has connected to that domain, you see the users, and so on. We see our firepower, our firewall has seen, and we see also which email gateway has seen that domain, with just 2 or 3 minutes of threat hunting. That's all. And that is possible when you have the right architecture. So let's think about, you have to search, you have to generate that outcome with a manual approach. I think that would take really long. And in the most companies, this is not possible. Okay, this is a real-world example. What is the time? 34 minutes? Yes, okay. So what happens here? There is a file coming on email. It drops a new file. It executes the second file. The second file, the OCX file holds just decryption information, and the ISO file is encrypted and compressed. The thing is, the second file loads the OCX file to decompress and decrypting the ISO file, generates a new file, and does like the first code injection. That's absolutely easy stuff. What happens the whole day? And then we have the download. You see, maybe the download is from, last time it was a website in Italy for boat renting. Anything was green. But it was compromised. And now think about your web traffic strategy. How do you handle TLS decryption? How do you handle partial download? How do you handle encrypted HTTP bodies? You see, your internet policy has an impact on your endpoint. So why that partial download is so interesting? First of all, GitHub, my example is GitHub without TLS connection. You don't see the content inside the TLS connection. Partial download. Malware uses that. Why? If you download a file and it's not complete and you're sending that file to a sandbox, you cannot analyze it. It's just a part of a file. Malware knows how customers are acting. Yeah? Hackers are using artificial intelligence inside their products. All that stuff. So in that example, we have a second download, and then we have a code injection, and then something gets malicious. And then we have all the stuff we don't want. So maybe we have a threat event. So maybe we have a threat event on an on-demand scan. And when we have a threat event based on the demand scan, how long this threat was active in my environment, what is my risk, what happened, and what is the behavior of that file. And the thing is, what happens if this is not a file? You have seen the fileless infection. So maybe you have no information about that. Then anything is cleaned up. Anything is cleaned up. The website is cleaned up. The system is cleaned up because ransomware does that, and you just have that thing. So there are many things happened, and you just have maybe a file, maybe not. That's the problem. And for threat hunting, you will have no chance. Yeah? So let's see that with the monitoring. So we have our connected intelligences. We have our monitoring engine. So the monitoring engine now monitors the whole activity. We see the source process, we see the parent process, we see the file exchange. We also see memory activity. If something doesn't change the memory. So we see the connection to the internet. We see the download. We also have the payload that is dropped. And we see what's happening. If we block something, so maybe we don't block it because it is in audit mode, we are generating that information. The thing is now, we have monitored the whole stuff which has, was was done on your endpoint. Yeah? So that means from a context perspective, once again, that event is just one part of our information of the context. Yeah? Okay, the thing is, what we want to do is, we don't want to lose that information for threat hunting. Go back here. So what is the time? Yes, oh, we are good on time. Perfect. Once again, command line. I think the command line is one of the most important things. So once again, who can tell me if this is bad? You need two things. You need the right monitoring, and you need the intelligence to process. So okay, so before we go to them, I will show you what is possible with an integrated architecture, or show it later. Let's see. Show it a little bit later. Yes, here it is. So I jumped over a few slides. So this is a typical threat hunting process we see at the customer. There is an endpoint infected, you're doing something, then maybe you are reinstalling the client and giving it back to the user. So think about your strategy. You see a command and control traffic on the next generation network. So I like next generation because today everything is next generation. Yeah? The next thing also my Coke will be next generation Coke. It's fine when it's blocked. From a threat hunting perspective, we have to answer completely different questions. Like, what is the client? Do we have information in our Active Directory or computer management database? Has this client vulnerabilities? What is the AV status? Who is doing the command and control? Was it BitAdmin? Was it my browser? Or was it an unknown executable? Where this unknown executable is, when it comes into my company, what is the behavior of that executable? Then maybe you're searching in your SIM. Then you're starting to search, maybe to search on your client, that most time happens. Then you need a bunch of tools to figure out. The most common tools, once again, is what I have seen at customers on-demand scan. Then we're adding maybe, I think, Malwarebytes. So Malwarebytes you can just execute, doing a second on-demand scan. And then if no file is detected, everyone or the most customers expecting the disk is clean. But think about fileless things. And then you figure out a.exe on your system. e.exe maybe in the user profile or in the client-side caching folder when it is not encrypted. What are you doing today? What is my process now when I find an unknown executable on my disk? How can I figure out, do I have a problem or no? You know, 1.2 million unknown files. 46 million operating system events in 20 minutes. And there is now one file, maybe you have hundreds or thousands of endpoints, or you have one file. What are your options? So the thing is, what to next? Is it a compromise? Is it a targeted attack? Do I have a persistent infection? Has it moved inside my environment? And so on. What can help is now, once again, context. So you see, many things that happens, like my example before, and then you may have a single threat event. Even you have multiple threat events, it does not show the real picture, it does not show the real problem. Let's think about context view to help an admin. What happened? You see here, we have the same example from a context perspective. We have an indication of compromise because we have an Acrobat reader with a vulnerability which was executed by another application. Acrobat reader generated a PDF on my disk and afterwards did network connections. Then it dropped an executable file, executed it, and the new executable file also did network connections. Then we have other stuff, and now it gets interesting. That malicious file executes check disk. So why a malicious file should execute my disk checking tool? And afterwards, what we can see is here that my check disk connects to internet, downloads a payload, and drops it on my disk. This is a real-world example that really happens in the field. And now think about it. This file is now unknown, and just maybe this file is unknown. Maybe you have an on-demand scan and remove that file 10 days later. And maybe this is the data shifting. Then everything is gone and you have no idea what happened. Okay, to see a short example, we are really good in time. Okay. Can you see my browser? Yes. So here it is. Just a second. To see the power of connected intelligences and what can be the outcome. So, two-factor authentication. Here it is. Okay, perfect. So we can close that. This is just a tool where we are analyzing web traffic. I don't want to talk about the tool, but just talk about the outcome. So we have a confirmed problem. So first of all, what you can see is we have a risk level 8. We have several risk levels as any product, but what we're also doing is here describing what it is. In that case, you see it's the Celity botnet. We have seen Celity botnet inside the web traffic. Now think about analyzing web traffic. I have a company in Austria, 12,000 employees, so over the day they have approximately 6,000 requests per second. So we have 6,000 log lines per second. And now figure out if something is bad inside that traffic. What we are doing now for the customer is, let's see here, we are correlating all files we have analyzed worldwide, the behavior of that files. So if that file does any network connection and we figure out there is something bad inside that network connection, we are correlating that with your web traffic log. And what we then can figure out is, let's go here, that could be on a single request at a specific time. Think about 6,000 requests per second, and from a single request, what we can figure out is you have a chance of 89% that on that system, a file inside the system directory could be changed. Or you see we have a chance of 94% that it is a Celity botnet. I think there was something with the firewall. So a chance of 95% that your system startup file was modified. And here it is, a chance of 93% that a threat has disabled your firewall. And all of that from a single line inside your web traffic log. Then we have a summary. And now it gets interesting. Here it is. This is the Celity botnet. What you can see here is we have one connection to Argentina, to that IP. We see another HTTP traffic to the same domain. We see another Celity communication with a different classification or risk level. And what you can see here is downloading graphical image files. Celity botnet uses information in image files for botnet communication. The thing is now, when I have that information from my web traffic log, I want to figure out what happened. And now, let's see what an integrated architecture can do for you. I click just here, I'm jumping back into my endpoint and see, this is my client. This client has done that botnet communication. Then I click on that client and see these are the executables which have done the communication. They are already classified as malicious. When you click here, you see also outgoing connection from infection1.exe to that domain, to that IP on port 80, and you also see the timestamp. And the next question now is, do we see more here. What you can do now is here, you just click the hash of that file and send it to investigate. Oh, I also see it here. We are good in time. Okay, that have to log in, sorry. Okay, yes, here it is. So it's automatically added into my investigation. And what you can see is, this is my investigation here. So you see, this is the hash of my file. The second thing, what you see here is now my relation graph. So here is my hash. We can see we have a dependency to vboxtrade.exe. I don't know what it is. The file name was infection1.exe. This is my target host. This file connected to that IP. We also see that file connected to a malicious domain. What we also see is, let's see here, if we have another one. We have also here, we see, let's go it here, the parent. This file, we started our investigation. The parent file is a parent of this malicious file. So that means this malicious file was generated by another malicious file. We see the file path, we see the file name, just with one click. And that's fully automated in the background, and therefore we need connected intelligences, and we need an architecture, because the architecture is able to process that information. And then we can store it in casebooks, we can add more and more to our investigation, we can make that thing bigger, and then we have our timeline. So why we have a timeline? The timeline helps us to understand if it was just some malicious stuff in my environment, or was it more targeted attack. So what we are doing is here, we are correlating in the backend what is monitored from my endpoints and where we have seen the same threat or the same behavior on a worldwide base. We see the judgment, which system has changed the disposition, and the interesting stuff here is sightings. When this file has seen in our environment, that means in our backend systems and in your local system. You see, M for endpoints has observed that file 5 days ago. It was detected. So we have really an awesome resolution, but I hope. So we see it's an M for endpoint event for that file. So why? So we are also generating the information, was a file removed or not, when was it removed, when was it first on the endpoint. And once again here, so we click on that event. So we can now coming back once again here, and we see all what happens with that file, just with a click. To figure out. Makes it really easy. Okay, so the presentation is public. So you can share it or request it here. Okay, that was my demo. So from my side, thanks for your patience. I think we can now start with the Kahoot session. I think we have 3 prizes, that's right? Perfect. One, two, three.
Уважаемые участники конференции, сейчас состоится викторина, в которой вы можете выиграть призы от ЦИСКа. Для участия в этой викторине вы должны скачать приложение Kahoot или зайти в интернет по ссылке kahoot.it. Всего будет 6 вопросов, 5 из которых по 1 минуты. Победителям данной викторины будет тот,
Oh,
кто
sorry.
самый быстро ответит на эти вопросы, и тот, кто правильно на них ответит.
Okay, so what we have here, Iceman, 30 players. Okay. So Kahoot is interesting because it depends how fast are you answering and how many questions you have right in a row. Gives you more points. Yeah. Voodoo, what we have here, Demon, Sergei, Dmitri. It's going on, it's going on. Okay, so has anyone troubles with the app on a phone? Yeah. 62, 63. Okay, so is anyone expecting problems, or so we can start? So please raise your hand if you have problems. Ah, there are people also registering. Going out, coming in. Can we start? Yeah. Okay, let's start. 70. So we have 6 questions. That's interesting. I only have sent 5. Okay, let's see. Ah, okay. The first question is, I think, what is the name of the presenter?
Первый вопрос у нас пробный, чтобы вы ознакомились, как пользоваться данной программой.
No. So we have the time code here. We have 3 seconds, 2, 1. Oh. Okay. Okay. Okay, so this was the first test. The next question. An endpoint AV signature knows which file types on your disk. All files, all executable files, a set of non-executable files, or holds a complete copy of the information a vendor provides. What do you think? So we have much time for the Kahoot, for every question. 3, 2, 1, 0. Yes. So just a second, please. Just a second. Just a second, please. I have to explain the result. Okay, the next. The right answer was, I'm explaining it after that question. What is the time window for analysis in the AMP architecture? Not AMP endpoint, in the AMP architecture. Think about the presentation, that slide of the architecture where we are sending to the backend. So what do you think? Yeah, have seen the bubbles? Sending back to the backend where we are processing the information. So let's see. Yeah. So it's a minute for everyone. 2, 1, go. So let's see what are the answers. 20 are saying 2 to 10 milliseconds on the endpoint. The right answer is this one, fully automated, 7 days and more in the backend. So why that was a tricky question. You need the AMP architecture, not the AMP endpoint. Yes, you're right. We are analyzing 2 to 10 milliseconds on the endpoint, yeah, but only on the endpoint, and the endpoint is just part of the AMP architecture. We're also doing cloud disposition lookups from the endpoint. We don't do it for any file, we do it for files where we know or think we need that can take up to 200 milliseconds, but is also done on the endpoint. Machine learning is also tricky. Yes, machine learning takes time. It's an additional process inside the analysis on the endpoint that takes up to 500 milliseconds, but this is the right answer. Yeah? The architecture itself processes every hash we are monitoring for 7 days. So the answers for the first question was AV. So think about that 1.2 million unknown files on a disk. No, we don't know all executables. No vendor does that. You can check that, hash your files, compare it with VirusTotal. All non-executables, no. All information a vendor has, no. Think about, we are processing 120 terabytes per day. And think about if you're adding 5 billion new hashes to the signatures every week. That's not possible. And the right answer is we have best of breed executables and non-executable files in the engine, in the signature, which is processed. We are adding cloud lookups and the backend, this here, to get more. I think if you go to our salespeople, they can also show you what is the percentage of retrospective detection. Okay, so do we have, who's the leader at the moment? Okay, we see that yes, just a second. So we see here, VS is leading with 1,859 points. What is Romama? Okay. What means context in the AMP architecture? Is it a specific type of event? Is it a relationship between information? It is an indication of compromise, which is calculated by the backend, or it is a sandbox analysis result. So what do you think? What is the right answer for the AMP architecture and context inside? Think about my first slide with single spot, multi-spot, and Gotham City. Okay, so we could stress the people when we go down to 10 seconds. Yes, so it's really relaxed today. So inside Cisco we are using, I think, 5 seconds. So we have to answer really fast. You know, because the loser has to pay the beer, makes it more interesting. Okay, so what do you see? What are the answers? Yes, 36 have answered relationship between information. Yes, it is. You know that context, we are generating relationship between command line, IPs, domains, files, hashes. A specific event is part of our context. The event just generates the information how we handle the file. The indication of compromise is also an additional information inside the threat hunting process. And also the sandbox is part of the context. The sandbox generates us information for a file, what is the behavior of that file, and then we are generating a relationship between all that information. Okay, so let's click next one time, please. So let's see if something, okay, VS is in the lead, and I think we have a change here. LD is now behind. Okay, will be interesting. We have how many questions left? A few, okay, so click next. What is the key differentiator of the AMP architecture? The endpoint, the backend, the secure communication, or connected intelligences? So what do you think? So you have 1 minute. Once again, it's the AMP architecture. Just as a side note. Okay, come on. Okay, so 30 seconds left. We have 45 answers already. Three, two, one. C. Yes, the right answer is connected intelligences. Yes, so let's explain it in a short way. The endpoint, yes, the endpoint is part of our architecture, but it's also the sandbox, it's also the proxy, it's also email. So you have seen the screenshot with thread response, where we have all the email stuff already integrated. It's just a part. We have also the intelligences in the backend. We have also secure communication, so every communication between the systems is using TLS connection 1.2 with the latest Cypher suite available. But the key differentiator what we are working on is the connected intelligence. So at the end of the day, based on your license, we have up to 40 fully automated analysis systems with artificial intelligence equipped, connected together. You have seen my demo with cognitive analytics where we are analyzing web traffic. There are up to 600 actions per log line when we are analyzing that file, the log file. And so we have that intelligences and we are connecting that together in one solution. Okay, so let's see who's the leader now. VS. Okay, I think it's a race between VS, LD. Do we have an additional question? Yes, okay, let's go to the next question. What can be a malicious activity inside your environment? An image file download, execution of a script, adding a user, or all of them? Oh. Okay. So let's see the answers. 60 questions, 60 answers, 21 seconds left. Four, three, two, one. Yes. So let's see. Yes. That's the right answer. All listed activity can be malicious in a specific context. Most have chosen that answer, you know. Image file download from Twitter. Think about the APT29 group on Mitri Attack Framework. Just if you want to add information here, search on Google Mitri APT29. You will see how this group uses that one. Execution of Windows Update, yes, I have shown you. And also adding the user to my upcoming slides. Just an information, we are also doing threat hunting workshops where we're showing in a real lab how to hunt for that activity in your environment. Okay, so let's see who the winner is. Yes. First one, VS. Second one, LD. And third one is Rumatan, that's right? What's the right spelling? So who are the winners? I think we have a small prize here.
Пожалуйста, подойдите или хотя бы поднимите ручку, куда поднести вам подарок. Да, вы выйдите, пожалуйста, на сцену, мы сделаем фотографию.
Ja. Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thanks a lot for your time. I hope it was an interesting time for you. If you have questions regarding my presentation, come to the local team. They can share the information. We can also share the presentation. So I will be available until I think 5 p.m. today. Yeah. So if you have any questions, just reach out to us. We are here for
Есть
you.
вопросы у кого-то? Что ж, тогда небольшой перерыв, и через 15 минут ждем вас.
This one?